one of the more fascinating statistics that I just discovered is that there is a massive bias in business literature in business schools. And there's a lot that I can go into about this, but this bias is that we discount a lot of work that would be considered blue collar. We discount it quite severely in terms of blue collar work, being, work like babysitting, nannying, work like handyman, work like being a lawnmower, or um, doing yard work, work like um, I don't know, a plumber, work like I don't know what else is there, secretarial work or administrative work. And I look at this and I look at the bias. The argument is those aren't legitimate businesses. But if you were to look at the economy and you were to ask somebody what their job is, you have a much higher likelihood of somebody saying that I'm a plumber. I am a yard worker. I am a migrant worker than anybody ever saying that they are Fortune 500 CEO. Um, in fact, there's only 500 of those Fortune 500 CEOs, maybe a give or take, 505 or 495. But for the most part, um, we're neglecting a huge part of the economy. And we focus on prestige, we focus on status. There's lots of reasons for that. I can get into it. Um, you know, Two of the biggest reasons, I think, the reason why we sort of focus on this is because of data and access to data. So we tend to um, legitimize access to data, hard data, legitimize it that we have access to it. And those typically tend to be Fortune 500 companies. Um, and anything that is legitimate, that's considered legitimate in terms of business research, is Fortune 500 companies. On the other side, there is a lot of methodologies that we use that would be considered that would essentially prevent anybody from focusing on those kind of workers. So, for example, um, interviewing babysitters would be highly discounted because it's not considered reliable or valid knowledge. For example, it's also considered small fry, where you get that sort of small fry effect. I remember I've had this conversation so many times. It's fascinating because almost everybody, particularly um, I almost know who's going to respond in a certain way. Um, if they built their career essentially on Fortune 500 companies, they will say dismissively, very dismissively, that those small businesses don't count. And I think in my head, I'm thinking, that's first of all, that's a pretty very presumptuous thing to say when the majority of any country's economy is based on that kind of employment, those kind of businesses. Um, but secondly, the other point is that uh, these are individuals that actually do matter. And the problem is it's hard to capture that with the data that we have access to. And even if we were to collect data on that, let's say you were to collect hard data on it and you were to do a survey on babysitters, what's fascinating is that survey would be highly discounted because would be considered single respondent, for example. Uh, it's considered often by um, somebody. Let's imagine that they're underage. It's hard to capture that data, right? Let's say that they are between the ages of 13 and 18. It's hard to capture that data because they're underage. The other thing that's really fascinating is migrant workers, for example, right? And a lot of those people that are nannies, for example, are here, maybe not in the in a certain country, maybe they are legitimate, maybe they aren't, but they're certainly not going to be open to sharing these experiences, and there might be a literacy problem that's happening there. It's super fascinating if you start thinking about it and you're breaking it down, that there's all of these segments of the market that some of them do actually turn into real legitimate things that are really big. There are, in any given city across the United States, across the world, you pick an area like that, whether it is lawn mowing, for example, or maybe babysitting, for example, or cleaning, cleaning homes, for example. There is a legitimate large business that has grown from small roots where it's just a single individual that would be discounted, and they're large, right? Like in the town that you would consider them to be, maybe they have revenues of, in terms of American dollars, in America that'd be, revenues of like $1 million. And in most towns, I think most people would say $1 million is it's not big in comparison to these larger corporations, but that is a substantial organization that people would recognize. I think we need to start focusing on these different areas um, that are very easy to neglect, and yet they're very important in the economy. And there's many reasons, right? As the data issue, the sort of dismissive issue, the fact that that there's a prestige issue. If you're going into business school, you're going to get a better job, and yada yada yada. I want you to talk to the number of, and often it's going to be targeting groups that they might not get the same fanfare, right? Because of our natural biases that we have in certain economies. Um, so, for example, right, like who is primarily going to be the sort of breadwinner, or who is primarily going to be the person that's going to stay at home? You probably know who it's going to be, and they're the ones that are most likely to start these little businesses, or a blogging business or something along those lines, because they need that flexibility. So I'd encourage you to really start questioning our norms of how we actually do business, and what we're trying to represent. There's a whole host of amazing individuals doing super fantastic things in this world that are not being captured in any sort of way. And it's almost staggering when you start to look at the role models or cases that we have access to, and essentially they're not being represented. Um, I think we can change this, but it takes people. I think where it's going to really step up is people actively taking a lead, um, where they are doing research, but also demonstrating with cases, really targeting individuals that might be neglected in various different ways because of just the standard way of doing things, right? But we know these are legitimate in huge parts of the economy that we need to explore and understand and talk about, rather than just simply dismissing them as unimportant. All right, take care and have a wonderful day.